The blood on Katherine Reed's dress had dried to a rusty brown by the time she stumbled into Centralia, Washington. And she knew, without looking, that every eye in the settlement was fixed on her, with the kind of judgment that could bury a woman alive. It was early September of 1878, and the morning mist clung to the timber town like gossip clung to scandal, both equally persistent and suffocating. Katherine's hands trembled as she clutched the torn fabric at her shoulder, trying to hold together what remained of her dignity along with her bodice. The dress had been pale blue once, pretty even, but now it told a story she had never wanted written. She had survived something terrible in those woods 3 days past, something that started when she accepted a ride from a man she thought was taking her to her teaching position in the next town over. Instead, he had taken her miles into the wilderness, done unspeakable things, and left her for dead. But Katherine Reed was not dead. She had crawled, walked, and finally ran until she found this town, this hope of civilization. What she found instead was a different kind of death. "Look at the state of her," a woman's voice carried clear across the muddy Main Street. "Shameful." Katherine's throat tightened, but she kept walking toward what looked like a general store. She needed help. She needed water, bandages, somewhere to clean herself up. She needed someone to believe her. "Probably got herself into trouble and came here looking for a handout." Another voice chimed in, this one male and cruel with certainty. The store owner, a thin man with wire spectacles, took one look at her and shook his head. "We do not serve women of ill repute here. Move along." "Please," Katherine's voice cracked. "I was attacked. I need help. I am a schoolteacher I was on my way to. I have heard every story there is," the man interrupted. "And I know what I see. You brought whatever happened upon yourself, and I will not have you bringing that kind of trouble to my establishment." Katherine felt the world tilt beneath her feet. She had survived the attack. She had survived 3 days in the wilderness eating berries and drinking from streams. But she had not anticipated this, that the people who were supposed to help her would look at her torn dress and disheveled hair and decide she was the villain in her own tragedy. She turned slowly, looking at the gathered crowd. Women pulled their children closer. Men looked at her with a mixture of disgust and something worse, something that made her skin crawl. She was not a person to them anymore. She was a fallen woman, and in 1878 in a small timber town in Washington Territory, that was a death sentence that did not require a noose. "Please," she tried again, her voice barely a whisper. "Someone. Anyone." That was when she heard the horse. The sound of hooves on packed earth was heavy, purposeful, and when Katherine turned toward the sound, she had to tilt her head back to take in the full measure of the man riding into town. He sat atop a massive black stallion, and he was built like the mountains that surrounded this valley, all broad shoulders and powerful muscle. His hair was dark brown and hung past his shoulders, tied back with a strip of leather, and his jaw was covered with several days' worth of beard. He wore buckskin and fur, and across his back was strapped a rifle that looked well used but meticulously maintained. The mountain man's eyes, a striking pale blue that seemed to see everything, swept across the scene with the kind of assessment that came from years of reading situations for survival. Those eyes landed on Katherine, took in her torn dress and desperate expression, then moved to the hostile crowd, and something in his expression hardened into granite. He dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots hitting the ground with solid authority. Katherine watched as he moved toward her with the kind of walk that made people step aside without him saying a word. He had to be well over 6 feet tall, and the breadth of his shoulders made him seem even larger. His arms, visible beneath rolled-up sleeves, were corded with muscle built from hard living in unforgiving country. "Looks like you could use some help, miss," he said, his voice a low rumble that carried more kindness than Katherine had heard in days. His eyes met hers, and there was no judgment there, only concern. "She is not worth your trouble, Beckett," the store owner called out. "Just some woman who got herself into a bad situation. Probably a prostitute from Seattle trying to work her way through the timber towns." The mountain man, Beckett apparently, did not even glance at the store owner. His attention remained fixed on Katherine. "Is that true, miss? Are you a prostitute?" Katherine's chin came up despite her exhaustion. "No, I am a school teacher. I was attacked 3 days ago by a man who offered me a ride. He left me in the woods to die, but I did not die. I made it here, and these people—" Her voice broke. "These people have decided I deserved what happened to me." Beckett's jaw tightened, and when he finally did turn to look at the crowd, his expression was cold enough to frost the September air. "Which one of you has offered this woman food, water, or medical attention?" Silence answered him. "That is what I thought." Beckett's voice carried across the street. "You are all real brave, passing judgment on a woman who is clearly hurt and in need. Real Christian of you. Now you wait just a minute, Beckett Anderson." A portly man in a suit stepped forward. Katherine recognized the bearing of someone used to being in charge. "We do not know this woman. We do not know what she has done or where she has been. We have to protect our community, our families." "From what?" Beckett's voice was dangerously quiet. "From a woman who weighs maybe 120 pounds soaking wet and can barely stand. You are protecting your families from her." The portly man's face reddened. "From the kind of trouble she represents. A woman does not end up in that condition unless she has made poor choices." "We cannot— You know what I see," Beckett interrupted, taking a step toward the man. "I see a scared woman with bruises on her wrists and throat. I see torn clothing and blood that is not from any willing encounter. I see someone who fought like hell to survive, and I see a bunch of cowards who would rather blame her than help her because it is easier." "You cannot talk to me like that," the portly man sputtered. "I am the mayor of this town, and you should be ashamed of yourself," Beckett finished. He turned back to Katherine, and his expression softened. "My name is Beckett Anderson. I have a cabin about 5 miles from here up in the mountains. It is clean, it is safe, and I give you my word that no harm will come to you there. You can rest, heal up, and decide what you want to do next. No strings, no expectations. Just help if you want it." Katherine stared at him, searching his face for any hint of deception. She had trusted before, and it had nearly killed her. But there was something in Beckett Anderson's steady gaze, something solid and true that made her want to believe him. And more than that, she had no other options. This town had made it clear she was not welcome. "Why would you help me?" she asked quietly. "You do not know me." "Because it is the right thing to do," Beckett said simply. "And because everyone deserves a chance to heal, no matter what anyone else says about their reputation." Those words, that simple kindness, broke something open inside Katherine. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. "They said my reputation is already ruined forever." Beckett reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she did not, he gently touched her shoulder. "Then your future starts with me now, if you will let it. And I do not give a damn about your reputation. I care about whether you are hurt and need help. The answer to both of those is yes, so let me help." Katherine nodded, not trusting her voice. Beckett moved to his horse and returned with a fur-lined coat that he draped carefully over her shoulders. It was massive on her frame but warm and smelled like pine and wood smoke. He helped her onto his horse with surprising gentleness for such a large man, then swung up behind her. His arm came around her waist, steady and secure. "You are making a mistake, Anderson," the mayor called out. "That woman is trouble. Beckett looked down at the man from his elevated position. "The only mistake I see is this town's lack of basic human decency. You all should pray you never find yourself in need of mercy, because based on today, you would not know how to give it." With that, he turned his horse and headed out of town. Katherine leaned back against his solid chest, exhausted beyond measure, and let herself believe, just for a moment, that maybe she had found safety after all. The ride to Beckett's cabin took them through thick forest that smelled of cedar and fir. The September air was cool but not cold, and shafts of sunlight broke through the canopy in golden streams. Katherine drifted in and out of awareness, her body finally giving in to the exhaustion she had been fighting for days. Each time she started to slip, Beckett's arm tightened just slightly around her waist, keeping her secure. "Almost there," he said quietly as they crossed a stream and began climbing a gentle slope. The cabin, when it came into view, was larger than Katherine had expected. It was built from massive logs, clearly hewn by hand, and sat in a clearing surrounded by towering evergreens. There was a well-maintained corral to one side, a vegetable garden that showed careful tending, and a neat stack of firewood that stood taller than Katherine. Everything about the place spoke of a man who lived deliberately and well, even in isolation. Beckett dismounted and reached up to help Katherine down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground, and he caught her easily, sweeping her up into his arms like she weighed nothing at all. "I can walk," she protested weakly. "I am sure you can," Beckett agreed, carrying her toward the cabin, "but you have walked far enough for now." Inside, the cabin was clean and surprisingly well appointed. There was a large fireplace on one wall, a sturdy table with 2 chairs, shelves lined with books and supplies, and in the corner, a real bed with what looked like a thick mattress and wool blankets. Beckett carried Katherine to the bed and set her down gently. "I am going to start heating some water," he said. "You need to get cleaned up and those cuts need tending. I have medical supplies. I will leave you some privacy, but I will be right outside if you need anything. Can you manage to undress yourself?" Katherine nodded, though she was not entirely certain she could. Beckett seemed to read her doubt because he moved to a trunk and pulled out a soft flannel shirt that would be enormous on her. "Use this after you wash up," he said, setting it beside her. "Take your time. There is no rush and you are safe here. I give you my word on that." He left, closing the door quietly behind him, and Katherine sat for a long moment just breathing. Safe. The word felt foreign, like a language she had forgotten how to speak. But slowly, painfully, she began to remove her ruined dress. Every movement reminded her of bruises and scrapes she had acquired during her ordeal, but she forced herself to continue. When Beckett knocked some time later, she called for him to enter. He came in carrying a large basin of warm water and clean cloths. He set them on the table beside the bed, his eyes carefully averted from her form, which was now covered by his oversized shirt. "There are bandages here," he said, pointing to a basket he had brought, "and salve for the cuts. Do you need help, or would you prefer to do it yourself?" Katherine looked at the supplies, then at her shaking hands. "I think I might need help," she admitted quietly. "My hands are not very steady." Beckett nodded and pulled the chair over to sit beside the bed. He dipped a cloth in the warm water and wrung it out. "I am going to clean the cut on your forehead first. Tell me if I am too rough." He was not rough at all. His large hands were surprisingly gentle as he cleaned the wounds she could not reach easily. He worked in quiet concentration, his touch clinical but kind. When he got to the bruises on her wrists, his jaw tightened, but he said nothing, just cleaned them carefully and applied salve before wrapping them in clean bandages. "You did well to survive," he said finally, breaking the silence. 3 days in the woods with no supplies, Most people would not have made it. I did not want to give him the satisfaction of killing me, Katherine said, her voice harder than she expected. I did not want him to win. Beckett met her eyes. He did not win. You are here. You survived. That makes you the winner, no matter what those people in town said. Fresh tears threatened, but Katherine blinked them back. They decided who I was without even asking. They looked at me and saw trash, something used and discarded. Then they are fools, Beckett said firmly. I look at you and see a fighter. I see someone strong enough to survive something that would have broken a weaker person. Your past does not define you, Miss Reed. Your future does, and that starts now. Katherine studied him in the lamplight. He had a strong face, weathered by sun and wind, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled more than he frowned. There was a scar along his left jaw, thin and white with age, and his nose looked like it had been broken at least once. But his eyes, those pale blue eyes, held a steadiness that made Katherine want to trust him. "Why do you live up here alone?" she asked. Beckett was quiet for a moment, finishing his work on her wounds before answering. "I came out west after the war. Things I saw, things I did, they made it hard to be around people. The mountains do not judge, they do not ask questions, they just are, and I found peace in that." He paused, then added, "But I am not a hermit. I go into town for supplies, I trade furs and meat. I just prefer my own company most of the time." "Were you at the war?" Katherine asked softly. She had been just a child during the Civil War, but she remembered the men who came back, the haunted look in their eyes. "I was," Beckett confirmed. "Fought for the Union. Did things I am not proud of. Saw friends die in ways no one should die. When it was over, I just wanted quiet. Wanted to live somewhere that the loudest sound was wind through the trees instead of cannons and screaming." Katherine understood that kind of wanting, the desire to escape from something that had marked you. "I am sorry," she said. "We have all got our scars," Beckett replied. "Some of them just show more than others." He stood, gathering the used cloths. "You should rest now, proper rest in a real bed. I will be in the other room if you need anything. There is a bolt on the inside of the door if it will make you feel safer." Katherine looked at the door, then back at Beckett. "I do not think I need it." Something shifted in Beckett's expression, a flicker of surprise and perhaps gratitude. "All right then. Sleep well, Miss Reed." "Katherine," she said. "You can call me Katherine." "Katherine," Beckett repeated, and the way he said her name, careful and respectful, made something warm bloom in her chest. "Good night, Katherine." "Good night, Beckett." She slept for 14 hours straight, not waking once. When she finally opened her eyes, sunlight was streaming through the cabin window, and the smell of coffee and frying bacon made her stomach clench with sudden, fierce hunger. She sat up slowly, testing her body's aches and pains, and found them improved from the day before. The shirt Beckett had given her fell nearly to her knees, and she felt ridiculous in it, but it was clean and soft, and that was enough. She opened the bedroom door to find Beckett at the stove, cooking breakfast. He had clearly been up for hours. His hair was damp like he had washed it, and he had trimmed his beard slightly. When he turned and saw her, he smiled, and Katherine realized it was the first genuine smile anyone had offered her in what felt like forever. "Morning," he said. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Katherine admitted. "Sore but better, and very hungry." "Good, sit down, food is almost ready." Katherine sat at the table and accepted the coffee Beckett poured for her. It was strong and hot and perfect. When he set a plate in front of her loaded with bacon, eggs, and thick slices of bread, she almost cried at the simple kindness of it. They ate in companionable silence for a while before Beckett spoke. "I have been thinking about your situation. You said you were on your way to a teaching position." Katherine nodded. "In Olympia. I had secured a position at the school there." But I never arrived, and by now they will have hired someone else. What about family? Is there anyone who should know you are safe? Catherine's hands tightened around her coffee cup. No. My parents died of fever 2 years ago. I have no siblings. The teaching position was supposed to be my fresh start, my chance to build a life for myself. Beckett was quiet for a moment. You could stay here. For a while, I mean. Until you figure out what you want to do next. I know it is not conventional, but nothing about this situation is. You are welcome to stay as long as you need. Katherine looked around the cabin, then back at Beckett. People would talk. They already think the worst of me. If they knew I was living here with you, unchaperoned. Let them talk, Beckett said firmly. Their opinions do not feed you or keep you safe. But I understand your concern. What if I build you your own small cabin nearby, something separate so it is clear you have your own space? Would that be better? Katherine blinked at him. You would do that. I would. I have the timber, I have the tools, and I have the skill. It would not be large, but it would be yours. A place where no one could touch you or judge you, where you could decide what comes next without pressure. The offer was so generous, so unexpected, that Katherine did not know what to say. She had gone from being attacked and left for dead to being rejected by an entire town to sitting in a warm cabin with a man who was offering to build her a house. The whiplash of it all made her head spin. Why are you doing this? She asked. Really? You do not know me. I could be anyone. Beckett set down his coffee and looked at her steadily. About 5 years ago, I found a young woman in the woods not far from here. She had run away from a man in town who was beating her, his wife. She was bleeding and broken and so scared she nearly shot me when I approached. I brought her here, helped her heal, and then I helped her get on a stage to Seattle where she had family. He paused. She wrote me a letter a year later. She was doing well, had found work, was building a life. She thanked me for giving her a chance when everyone else had decided her fate for her. What does that have to do with me? Katherine asked softly. It reminded me that sometimes people just need someone to believe in them when they have lost the ability to believe in themselves. You did not deserve what happened to you, Katherine, and you deserve a chance to heal and rebuild. If I can give you that, why would I not? Katherine felt tears slide down her cheeks, but this time they were not tears of despair. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of hope. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you, Beckett. He reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand. You are welcome. Now finish your breakfast. You need your strength back. Over the next 2 weeks, Katherine watched in amazement as Beckett built her a cabin. He rose with the sun each day and worked until dusk, felling trees, stripping logs, fitting them together with a precision that spoke of years of experience. Katherine helped where she could, hauling smaller branches, gathering stones for the fireplace foundation, cooking meals to keep Beckett's strength up. As she worked beside him, she learned about the man who had saved her. Beckett Anderson was 32 years old, born in Ohio, and had come west after the war like so many other veterans. He had tried city living in San Francisco for about 6 months before the crowds and noise drove him back into the wilderness. He made his living trapping and hunting, selling furs and meat to the settlements. He read voraciously, which explained the extensive book collection in his cabin. He was patient, kind, and had a dry sense of humor that surprised her, and he was handsome. Katherine tried not to notice, tried to keep her thoughts focused on gratitude and nothing more, but it was impossible to ignore. When Beckett worked shirtless in the September sun, his muscles moving beneath bronzed skin, his hair tied back and his expression focused, Katherine found herself watching him with more than simple appreciation. He was beautiful in the way that wild things are beautiful, all strength and power and freedom. But more than his physical appearance, Katherine was drawn to his character. He never pressed her for details about her attack. He never made her feel weak or damaged. He treated her like a person worthy of respect and kindness, and that simple gift meant more to her than all the material help he was providing. One evening, as they sat outside watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, Beckett spoke without looking at her. "You never told me about the man who attacked you." Katherine tensed, her hands gripping her knees. "Do you need to know?" "No," Beckett said immediately. "You do not owe me that story, but sometimes carrying things alone makes them heavier. If you want to tell me, I will listen. If you do not, that is fine too." Katherine was quiet for a long time, watching the light fade from the sky. Finally, she spoke. "His name was Samuel Grant. He came to the boarding house where I was staying and said he was a trader heading to Olympia. He offered me a ride since I was going the same direction. He seemed respectable, well-dressed, polite." She paused, swallowing hard. "About 10 miles outside of town, he turned off the main road. When I questioned him, he hit me, hard enough that I saw stars. Then he kept driving until we were deep in the woods." Beckett's hands had curled into fists, but he said nothing, just listened. "He did things," Katherine continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Terrible things. And then he told me that no one would believe me because I was just some plain schoolteacher with no family and no prospects, and he was a businessman with connections. He said even if I survived and made it to a town, they would assume I was a prostitute or that I had wanted it. Then he left me there. But you survived," Beckett said, his voice rough with emotion. "You found your way out. I crawled at first, then I walked. I followed a stream because I remembered reading that streams eventually lead to civilization. I ate berries that I hoped were not poisonous. I slept in hollow logs and under bushes, and I promised myself that if I survived, I would not let him take my future away from me." Katherine turned to look at Beckett. "But when I got to Centralia and those people looked at me like I was filth, I thought maybe he was right. Maybe I was ruined forever." Beckett turned to face her fully, his pale blue eyes intense in the fading light. "Listen to me, Katherine Reed. You are not ruined. You are not damaged goods. You are a survivor and you are strong, and anyone who cannot see that is a fool. That man did not take your future. He tried, but he failed. You are still here, you are still fighting, and that means you win." Katherine felt something crack open inside her chest, something that had been locked tight since the attack. "I want to believe that." "Then believe it," Beckett said. "Your future starts now, Katherine. Right here, right now. And no one gets to tell you otherwise." She reached out and took his hand, squeezing it tightly. Beckett squeezed back, his large hand warm and strong around hers. They sat like that as the stars came out, hand in hand, and Katherine felt something she had not felt in a long time. She felt hope. The cabin was finished by the end of September. It was small, just one room with a fireplace, a bed frame that Beckett built by hand, a table and chair and shelves for storage. But it had good bones, a solid roof and windows that let in light. Beckett had even carved a small design into the lintel above the door, a pattern of flowers that Katherine recognized as wild roses. "It is beautiful," Katherine said, standing in the doorway and looking around with wonder. "Beckett, this is truly beautiful." He stood behind her, looking pleased but trying to hide it. "It will keep you warm and dry. That is what matters. I brought some extra blankets and supplies from my cabin to get you started. You will want to gather more firewood before the real cold sets in, but we have time for that." Katherine turned to face him. "I do not know how I will ever repay you for this." "There is nothing to repay," Beckett said firmly. "This is a gift, freely given. You do not owe me anything, Katherine." But Katherine wanted to give him something, wanted to repay his kindness in some way. Let me teach you something then. You said you like to read. What if I taught you something new? Do you know French? Beckett laughed, a deep, rich sound that made Katherine smile. French? No, I cannot say that I do. Then let me teach you. I was required to learn it as part of my teacher training. It would give me something to do, a purpose beyond just surviving. Beckett considered this. All right, but only if you let me teach you some things too. How to track, how to identify plants, how to shoot properly. Skills that will help you if you ever find yourself alone in the woods again. Katherine extended her hand. We have a deal. They shook on it, and Katherine felt the warmth of his palm against hers, the calluses earned through hard work, the strength that had built her a home. When he let go, she almost pulled his hand back, wanting to hold on just a little longer. October brought cooler weather and the turning of leaves. The forest around Beckett's cabin and Katherine's new home blazed with color, golds and reds and oranges that seemed to set the world on fire. Katherine fell into a routine that was both strange and comforting. She woke in her own cabin, made her own breakfast, and then usually walked over to Beckett's place where they spent the days together. True to his word, Beckett taught her wilderness skills. He showed her how to read animal tracks in the mud, how to tell which plants were edible and which were poison, how to find north without a compass. He taught her to shoot his rifle, standing behind her to adjust her grip, his arms around hers as he showed her how to sight down the barrel. Katherine tried to focus on his instruction and not on the way her heart raced when he was close. In turn, Katherine taught Beckett French. They sat at his table in the evenings, working through vocabulary and grammar. Beckett was a surprisingly quick learner, and he seemed to enjoy the challenge. Katherine loved watching his face as he puzzled through a new phrase, the way his brow furrowed in concentration, the pleased smile when he got something right. "You are a good teacher," he told her one evening after successfully conjugating a series of verbs. "Those students in Olympia missed out." Katherine felt a pang at the mention of the life she had lost, but it was duller now, less sharp. Maybe it was not meant to be. Maybe I was meant to end up here instead. Beckett looked at her thoughtfully. "Do you really believe that there is a plan to all this?" "I do not know," Katherine admitted. "But it helps to think that maybe something good can come from something terrible. That maybe I was supposed to meet you to learn all this, to become someone different than who I was." "Who were you before?" Beckett asked quietly. Katherine thought about it. "I was careful, obedient. I did what was expected of me, followed the rules, tried to make myself small and acceptable. I thought if I was good enough, quiet enough, proper enough, that life would reward me somehow." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That did not work out very well." "And who are you now?" Katherine met his eyes. "I am still figuring that out, but I think I am someone who fights, someone who survives, someone who is not afraid to take up space anymore." Beckett smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "I like that person. I like her very much." The words hung in the air between them, carrying more weight than their simple construction suggested. Katherine felt her cheeks warm, and she looked down at the French textbook on the table, suddenly very aware of how close Beckett was sitting, how easy it would be to lean just a little closer. "Katherine," Beckett said softly. She looked up, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. There was tenderness there, and longing, and something that looked very much like the feelings that had been growing in her own heart. "I know this is complicated," he said. "I know you have been through something terrible, and the last thing you need is pressure from me. But I need you to know that these past few weeks, having you here, teaching you and learning from you, it has been the best part of my life in a long time. Maybe ever. And I find myself caring for you in a way that goes beyond just wanting to help." Katherine's heart was pounding so hard she was certain Beckett could hear it. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I have feelings for you," Beckett said plainly. Real feelings. The kind that keep me up at night thinking about you, hoping you are warm enough in your cabin, wanting to make you smile. But I also know that you might not feel the same way, and that is fine. I just needed to be honest with you. Katherine stared at him, this mountain man who had saved her life and given her a home and asked for nothing in return. This man who was strong enough to fell trees and gentle enough to bandage her wounds. This man who looked at her and saw not a ruined woman but a fighter worth caring for. "I have feelings for you too," she whispered. "I have tried not to, because it seemed too soon and too complicated, but I cannot help it. When I am with you, I feel safe. I feel seen. I feel like maybe I could build a life that is not defined by what happened to me, but by what happens next." Beckett reached out and cupped her face in his hand, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. "Can I kiss you? I have wanted to for weeks now, but I need to know that it is what you want too." In answer, Katherine leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, both of them feeling their way into this new territory. But then Beckett's other hand came up to frame her face, and Katherine's hands found his shoulders, and the kiss deepened into something that made her whole body hum with warmth. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Beckett rested his forehead against hers. "I will never hurt you, Katherine. I promise you that. Whatever this is between us, it happens at your pace, on your terms." "I know," Katherine said, and she did. She trusted this man in a way she had not thought possible after what Samuel Grant had done to her. "I know, Beckett." They sat like that for a long time, foreheads touching, hands intertwined, and Katherine thought about how strange life was. A month ago, she had been fighting for her survival in the woods. 2 months ago, she had been a nobody schoolteacher with no family and few prospects. Now she was sitting in a cabin in the Washington mountains with a man who looked at her like she hung the moon, and she was happier than she had been in years. November brought the first snow, light dustings that melted by afternoon, but signaled the winter to come. Katherine and Beckett prepared together, making sure both cabins had enough firewood, that food was stored, that all the gaps in the walls were chinked tight against the cold. They worked side by side like they had been doing it for years, and Katherine marveled at how natural it felt. Their relationship deepened as the days grew shorter. They kissed often now, stolen moments of sweetness that made Katherine's toes curl. Beckett continued to be patient and gentle, never pushing for more than Katherine was ready to give. When she had nightmares about the attack, waking in her cabin sweating and terrified, she would see the lamplight in Beckett's cabin and know he was awake too, keeping watch. One particularly bad night, after a nightmare that left her shaking, Katherine pulled on her coat and walked to Beckett's cabin. She knocked softly, and he opened the door immediately, concern written across his face. "Another nightmare?" he asked. Katherine nodded, feeling foolish and young. "I am sorry, I should not have woken you." "You did not wake me, I was reading." Beckett stepped aside. "Come in. I will make you some tea." Katherine entered and sat by the fire while Beckett prepared tea with practiced efficiency. When he handed her the cup, she wrapped her hands around it, drawing comfort from the warmth. "You want to talk about it?" Beckett asked, settling into the chair across from her. "It is always the same," Katherine said quietly. "I am back in those woods and he is there and I cannot get away. But then the dream changes and suddenly I am in Centralia and everyone is pointing at me and saying I deserved it, that I am ruined." She looked up at Beckett with tears in her eyes. "What if they are right? What if I am too broken to ever be whole again?" Beckett moved from his chair to kneel in front of her, taking her hands in his. "Listen to me very carefully, Katherine Reed. You are not broken. You are healing, and healing is not a straight line. Some days will be hard. Some nights will be full of nightmares. But that does not mean you are ruined. It means you are human and you survived something traumatic and your mind is processing that. But what if I can never be normal again? Katherine whispered. What is normal? Beckett asked. I came back from the war with nightmares that lasted for years. I still have them sometimes. Does that make me broken? Katherine looked at him in surprise. You still have nightmares? Sometimes. Not as often as I used to, but yes. Usually about battles, about friends I lost. I wake up thinking I am back there and it takes me a while to remember where I am. He squeezed her hands. We are all carrying something, Katherine. The question is not whether we have scars, but whether we let those scars define us. How do I not let them define me? You live, Beckett said simply. You get up every morning and you live your life. You find joy where you can. You build something new. And you trust that the nightmares will fade with time because you are stronger than the fear. Katherine set down her tea and threw her arms around Beckett's neck, burying her face in his shoulder. He held her tight, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring soft reassurances. They stayed like that until Katherine's breathing evened out and the trembling stopped. Stay here tonight, Beckett said softly. Take the bed. I will sleep in the chair. You should not be alone after a nightmare like that. Katherine pulled back to look at him. I do not want to put you out of your bed. You are not putting me out. I have slept in worse places than a chair. When Katherine still looked uncertain, he added, Please, it would make me feel better knowing you are close by and safe. Katherine nodded and moved to the bed. Beckett banked the fire and settled into his chair with a blanket. But as Katherine lay there in the dark, she realized she did not want Beckett across the room. She wanted him close. Beckett, she called softly. Yes. Would you? Would you lie next to me, just to sleep? I do not want to be alone and the chair cannot be comfortable. There was a long pause, and then she heard him stand. Are you sure? I am sure. Beckett came to the bed and lay down on top of the blankets while Katherine was under them. He kept a respectful distance at first, but Katherine scooted back until her spine was against his chest. His arm came around her waist, holding her securely, and she felt his breath warm against her hair. Is this all right? He asked. This is perfect, Katherine whispered, and she meant it. In Beckett's arms, the nightmares could not touch her. She was safe, cherished, and for the first time since the attack, she felt like maybe she could truly heal. She fell asleep listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, and she slept through the rest of the night without a single bad dream. December arrived with heavy snow that blanketed the world in white. Katherine and Beckett settled into a domesticity that felt natural despite its unconventional nature. They took turns cooking meals, spent evenings reading by the fire, and on clear days, they snowshoed through the forest together. Beckett taught Katherine how to ice fish, and she taught him to bake bread that actually tasted good instead of the dense, flavorless bricks he had been making for himself. The physical relationship between them progressed slowly but steadily. Kisses became longer, more passionate. Touches lingered. One evening in mid-December, as they sat together on Beckett's bed fully clothed, Katherine climbed into his lap and kissed him with an intensity that made him groan against her mouth. Katherine, he said, his voice strained. We should slow down. Why? She asked, pulling back to look at him. I want this, Beckett, I want you. I know, but I need to make sure you are ready, really ready, not just saying you are because you think it is what I want. Katherine took his face in her hands. I am not going to lie and say I am not nervous. Part of me is terrified. But a bigger part of me wants to reclaim this part of myself. I want to replace the terrible memories with good ones. And I trust you, Beckett. I trust you completely. Beckett searched her face, and whatever he saw there must have satisfied him because he nodded slowly. Then we go at your pace. The second you want to stop, we stop. No questions, no pressure. Understood, understood, Katherine agreed. What happened next was nothing like the attack. Beckett was patient and gentle, checking in with her constantly, making sure she was comfortable and willing. When Katherine tensed at certain touches, he slowed down or stopped entirely until she relaxed again. He worshipped her body with a reverence that made her feel beautiful and cherished, and when they finally came together, it was tender and sweet, and everything Katherine had needed it to be. Afterward, they lay tangled together under the blankets and Katherine cried, but this time the tears were healing. Beckett held her close and let her cry, understanding that this was part of the process, part of reclaiming what had been taken from her. "Thank you," she whispered when the tears finally stopped. "For what?" Beckett asked, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "For seeing me as more than what happened to me, for giving me the space to heal, for loving me even when I was not sure I could be loved." Beckett pulled back to look her in the eyes. "Katherine Reed, I fell in love with you the moment I saw you standing in that street refusing to back down even though the whole town was against you. I saw your strength, your courage, your refusal to give up. How could I not love you?" Katherine felt her heart swell. "I love you too, Beckett Anderson. I love your kindness and your strength and the way you make me feel safe. I love that you built me a cabin and taught me to shoot, and never once made me feel like I was less than whole." They kissed again, long and sweet, and Katherine knew with absolute certainty that this was where she was meant to be. Not in Olympia teaching school, not in some conventional life that society dictated, but here, in the mountains, with a man who loved her for exactly who she was. Christmas came and went quietly. Beckett surprised Katherine with a beautiful leather-bound journal and a set of pencils so she could write or draw. Katherine gave Beckett a scarf she had knitted from yarn she had bartered for when Beckett made a supply run to a different town. They cooked a special meal together and spent the evening making plans for the future. "What do you want, Katherine?" Beckett asked as they sat by the fire. "Long term, I mean. Do you want to go back to teaching eventually? Move to a town?" Katherine considered the question. "A month ago, I would have said yes. I would have said I needed to get back to my original plan, to building a respectable life. But now," she looked around the cabin, then at Beckett, "now I think I want to build something different. I want to stay here with you. Maybe I could teach children in the area if there are any, or maybe I find a different purpose. But I know I do not want to leave." "What about marriage?" Beckett asked carefully. "Is that something you want?" Katherine's heart skipped a beat. "Are you asking me to marry you?" Beckett smiled, that beautiful smile that transformed his whole face. "I am. I know it has only been a few months, and I know things have been unconventional, but I love you, Katherine. I want to build a life with you, a real life. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to face whatever comes together. So yes, I am asking you to marry me." Katherine launched herself at him, nearly knocking them both out of the chair. "Yes," she said, kissing his face, his jaw, his lips. "Yes, yes, yes. I will marry you, Beckett Anderson." Beckett laughed and caught her up in his arms, spinning her around the cabin. When he set her down, he pulled something from his pocket. It was a ring, simple and beautiful, made from what looked like silver with a small blue stone set in it. "I made it myself," he said, looking almost shy. "The stone is from the stream near your cabin. I thought you would like something that came from this place, from our home." Katherine held out her hand and Beckett slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. She looked at it through tear-blurred eyes and thought about how far she had come. From being attacked and left for dead, to being rejected by a town, to finding safety with a mountain man, to falling in love, and now this, an engagement to a man who made her feel like the most precious thing in the world. "When should we get married?" she asked. Beckett considered. "We could go to Olympia in the spring. It is a bigger town and no one there knows your story. We can get married proper in a church if you want, or by a justice of the peace. Whatever you prefer. Katherine thought about it. I do not need a big wedding. I just need you and me and someone to make it legal. Spring sounds perfect. They spent the rest of the winter planning and preparing. Beckett started work on an addition to his cabin that would give them more space. Katherine practiced her wilderness skills until she could track a rabbit through the snow and identify edible plants, even in winter. They read together, made love, argued occasionally about silly things like the best way to make coffee, and built a relationship that was rooted in mutual respect and genuine affection. In early March, when the worst of the winter was past but spring had not quite arrived, they made the journey to Olympia. It took 3 days by horse, staying at small inns along the way. Katherine registered them as siblings to avoid scandal, and Beckett played along, though his eyes promised that once they were married, he would make up for the nights spent apart. Olympia was larger than Centralia, a bustling town full of opportunity and growth. No one knew Katherine here. No one looked at her with judgment or whispered about her reputation. She was just another woman, unremarkable and anonymous, and that freedom was intoxicating. They found a justice of the peace on their second day in town, a kind older man who asked no intrusive questions and simply performed the ceremony in his small office. Katherine wore a new dress she had purchased in town, simple but pretty in a deep green that brought out her eyes. Beckett had trimmed his hair and beard and wore clean clothes that showed off his powerful build. When the justice pronounced them husband and wife, Beckett kissed Katherine with a passion that made the older man cough politely and look away. Katherine laughed against Beckett's mouth, giddy with joy and the knowledge that she was now Katherine Anderson, wife to the best man she had ever known. They spent their wedding night at the nicest hotel in Olympia, and Beckett loved his wife with a thoroughness that left her breathless and sated. In the morning, Katherine woke in his arms and thought about how strange life was. She had come to this town a year ago expecting to start a teaching position and build a quiet, respectable life. Instead, she had been attacked, left for dead, rejected by society, and ultimately found by a mountain man who saw past her trauma to the woman beneath. "What are you thinking about?" Beckett asked, his voice rough with sleep. "About how glad I am that I never made it to that teaching position," Katherine said honestly. "If I had, I never would have met you. I never would have discovered this strength in myself. I never would have learned that I am more than what society says I should be." Beckett kissed her shoulder. "I am glad too. Selfish as it is, I am glad that you ended up in Centralia that day. Glad that I was there to help. Glad that you gave me a chance even though you had every reason not to trust any man ever again." Katherine turned in his arms to face him. "You showed me that not all men are like Samuel Grant. You showed me that kindness still exists, that love can heal, that my future is not defined by my past." "What does your future look like now?" Beckett asked, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Katherine smiled. "It looks like you and me in our cabin in the mountains. It looks like quiet mornings and hard work and laughter. It looks like maybe children someday, when we are ready. It looks like building something real and lasting in a place where we make our own rules and do not worry about what anyone else thinks." "That sounds perfect," Beckett said, and kissed her to seal the promise. They returned to their mountain home a week later, loaded down with supplies and news. Beckett had secured contracts with several merchants in Olympia for his furs and meat, ensuring steady income. Katherine had purchased books and fabric and seeds for a garden. They settled back into their life with the satisfaction of people who knew they were exactly where they belonged. Spring arrived in full force in April, transforming the forest into a riot of green and birdsong. Katherine planted her garden while Beckett finished the cabin addition. They worked side by side, comfortable in their routines and in each other's presence. One evening in early May, as they sat outside watching the sunset, Katherine placed her hand on her stomach and took a deep breath. "Beckett, I need to tell you something." He looked at her, immediately alert to the seriousness in her tone. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am more than all right," Katherine said, smiling. "I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." Beckett's eyes went wide, and for a moment he just stared at her. Then he let out a whoop of joy and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around like he had when she accepted his proposal. When he set her down, his hands were gentle on her face, his expression full of wonder. "A baby," he said. "We are going to have a baby. Katherine, that is incredible. You are incredible." Katherine laughed, feeling tears of happiness slide down her cheeks. "Are you happy?" "Happy." Beckett pulled her close, one hand moving to rest on her still flat stomach. "I am beyond happy. I am blessed. You have given me everything, Katherine. A home, a purpose, love, and now this. How could I be anything but happy?" They spent the evening making plans and imagining what their child would be like. Would it be a boy or a girl? Would they have Katherine's eyes or Beckett's? Would they love the mountains as much as their parents did? The possibilities stretched out before them, full of promise and joy. The pregnancy was not easy. Katherine suffered from terrible morning sickness in the early months, and Beckett hovered like a worried mother hen, fetching her water and crackers and rubbing her back when she was ill. As she grew larger, simple tasks became difficult, and Beckett took over more of the physical labor without complaint. In late December, as snow fell thick and heavy outside, Katherine went into labor. Beckett had arranged for a midwife from a nearby settlement to stay with them for the last few weeks of the pregnancy. A capable woman named Martha, who had delivered dozens of babies in her time. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Beckett stayed by Katherine's side the entire time, holding her hand, offering encouragement, and looking more terrified than Katherine had ever seen him. But when their son finally entered the world with a healthy cry, Beckett wept openly, overcome with emotion. "A boy," Martha announced, cleaning the baby and wrapping him in a soft blanket. "A big, healthy boy. He has got a good set of lungs on him." She placed the baby in Katherine's arms, and Katherine looked down at her son in wonder. He had Beckett's blue eyes and a shock of dark hair. His tiny hands gripped at the air, and when Beckett offered his finger, the baby latched on with surprising strength. "He is perfect," Katherine whispered. "Beckett, look at him. He is absolutely perfect." "He is," Beckett agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "What should we name him?" Katherine had thought about this for months. "What about Benjamin, after your father?" Beckett looked surprised and touched. "You would do that, of course. You have given me everything. I want our son to carry your family forward." They named him Benjamin Reed Anderson, and he became the center of their world. Beckett proved to be a doting father, gentle and patient with his son. He built a cradle with his own hands, carved toys, and spent hours just watching Benjamin sleep. As winter gave way to spring and Benjamin grew from an infant into a curious, active toddler, Katherine marveled at the life they had built. She looked nothing like the terrified woman who had stumbled into Centralia almost 2 years earlier. That woman had thought her life was over, that her reputation was ruined, that she had no future worth living. But she had been wrong. Her future had started the moment Beckett Anderson offered her help in that hostile town. Her future had been built in a cabin in the mountains, through hard work and genuine love. Her future was this: a husband who adored her, a son who brought them both joy, and a life lived on their own terms. One afternoon in June, when Benjamin was about 18 months old, Katherine and Beckett sat outside watching their son toddle after a butterfly. The air was warm and sweet with the smell of pine and wildflowers. Beckett's arm was around Katherine's shoulders, and she leaned into his solid warmth. "Do you ever regret it?" Beckett asked quietly. "Staying here instead of building the life you planned?" Katherine turned to look at him, this mountain man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved. "Not for a single second. This life is better than anything I could have planned." "You are better than anything I could have imagined. They said my reputation was ruined forever, Beckett, but they were wrong. My future started with you, and it has been more wonderful than I ever dreamed possible." Beckett kissed her, soft and sweet, a promise renewed. "I love you, Katherine Anderson." "I love you too," Katherine said. "Always." Benjamin came running back to them, his chubby hands full of dandelions that he offered to his mother with a proud smile. Katherine accepted them like they were precious jewels and pulled her son onto her lap. Beckett wrapped his arms around both of them, and they sat like that as the sun moved across the sky. A family built from tragedy and trauma but rooted in love and hope. The years passed in that mountain clearing, marked by the changing seasons and the growing of their children. Katherine gave birth to a daughter 2 years after Benjamin, a girl they named Clara who had her mother's determination and her father's smile. 3 years after that came another son, Thomas, who was quiet and thoughtful and loved to read the books in Beckett's collection. The cabin grew with the family. Beckett added more rooms, built better furniture, and created a home that was warm and welcoming. Katherine taught all 3 of her children to read and write, passing on her love of learning. Beckett taught them wilderness skills, how to track and hunt and survive. Together, they raised children who were strong and kind and unafraid to be themselves. Sometimes travelers would pass through, and occasionally someone would ask Katherine about her past, why an educated woman was living in the mountains with a trapper. Katherine would smile and say simply that she had found exactly where she belonged. She never told them about Samuel Grant or the attack or the town that rejected her. Those things were part of her story, but they did not define her. What defined Katherine Anderson was the life she built with Beckett, the children they raised, the garden she tended, the books she read, the wilderness she learned to love. She was defined by her strength, her resilience, and her refusal to let the worst moment of her life dictate her future. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Beckett surprised Katherine by taking her back to the spot where he had first found her, that clearing in Centralia where she had stood alone against an entire town's judgment. The town had changed in a decade, grown larger and more prosperous. No one recognized them as they walked through the streets. "Why did you want to come back here?" Katherine asked, holding Beckett's hand. "Because I wanted to remind you how far you have come," Beckett said. "You stood right here, bruised and bleeding and terrified, and you still had the courage to ask for help. You survived something that would have destroyed most people, and you did not just survive, you thrived. I wanted you to see this place again, and remember that you are stronger than anything that tries to break you." Katherine looked around at the town that had rejected her, and she felt nothing but gratitude. If these people had helped her that day, she might have continued on to Olympia. She might have become a schoolteacher and lived a perfectly fine, perfectly ordinary life. But she would never have met Beckett. She would never have discovered her own strength. She would never have built the extraordinary life she now led. "Thank you," she said to Beckett, standing on her toes to kiss him. "Thank you for seeing me when no one else would. Thank you for believing in me when I could not believe in myself. Thank you for showing me that my future could start with you." They left Centralia hand in hand, riding back to their mountain home where their children waited. As they climbed into the familiar hills, Katherine thought about the words that had haunted her that terrible day. They said her reputation was already ruined forever. but reputation was just what other people thought of you. And Katherine had learned that other people's opinions mattered far less than her own sense of self-worth. Her reputation might have been ruined in the eyes of that town, but her life had been saved by a mountain man who taught her that the future was not written in stone. It could be built, day by day, choice by choice, with love and determination and courage. Years continued to pass in peaceful succession. Benjamin grew into a strong young man who shared his father's love of the wilderness. He eventually built his own cabin a few miles from his parents and made his living as a trapper and guide. Clara became a teacher, traveling to small settlements to educate children who had no school. She carried her mother's passion for learning and her father's fearlessness. Thomas became a skilled craftsman, building furniture and tools that were sought after throughout the territory. Beckett and Katherine watched their children grow and make their own paths with pride. They grew older together, Beckett's hair going more silver, Katherine's face gaining lines that spoke of years of laughter and hard work. They never regretted their unconventional life, never wished for the respectability that society said they should want. On a warm summer evening, when Katherine was in her 50s and Beckett approaching 60, they sat outside their cabin watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Their hands were clasped together, fingers intertwined, weathered and strong. "I have been thinking," Katherine said, "about that day we met, about how terrified I was, how certain I was that my life was over." "I remember," Beckett said quietly. "You looked like you were ready to fight the whole world." "I felt like I had to," Katherine said, "but then you offered me a different path. You said my future started with you, and you were right. Everything good in my life came from that moment. Our marriage, our children, this home, this life. All of it started because you chose to see me as worth saving." Beckett turned to her, his pale blue eyes still as clear and steady as they had been 30 years earlier. "You were always worth saving, Katherine. I just helped you see it." "We saved each other," Katherine said firmly. "I gave you purpose, someone to care for and protect. You told me once that you came to the mountains to escape the war, to find peace. Did you find it?" Beckett smiled and pulled her closer. "I found more than peace. I found home. I found love. I found everything I did not even know I was looking for. You saved me just as much as I saved you." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear. Somewhere in the forest, an owl called. The stream near Katherine's old cabin bubbled over stones. The air smelled of pine and earth and home. "You think they still talk about me in Centralia?" Katherine asked with amusement. "The fallen woman who disappeared into the mountains." "Probably," Beckett said. "But who cares? Let them talk. They do not know the real story. They do not know that the woman they dismissed built a life more rich and full than any of them could imagine. They do not know that you raised 3 amazing children, that you are loved beyond measure, that you are happy." "I am happy," Katherine confirmed. "Happier than I ever thought possible." "They said my reputation was ruined forever, but reputation does not matter when you have love, when you have family, when you have built something real and lasting with your own hands." Beckett kissed her temple. "Your future started with me, but you are the one who built it into something beautiful. Do not forget that, Katherine. You did this. You survived, you healed, you loved, you created this life. I was just lucky enough to be part of it." Katherine leaned against her husband's shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. She thought about the woman she had been, scared and alone and certain her life was over. She thought about the journey from that moment to this one, all the steps and choices and moments of courage that had led her here. "I would do it all again," she said softly. "Every hard moment, every scary choice, every time I had to be brave when I wanted to give up. I would do it all again because it led me to you." "And I would build you 100 cabins," Beckett said. "I would fight 100 towns full of judgmental people. I would do anything to have you in my life, Katherine Anderson. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." They stayed outside until the sky was full of stars, two people who had found each other in the worst circumstances and built the best life imaginable. Their story was not the one Katherine had planned. It was better. It was real and hard one and filled with love that had weathered every storm. Eventually, they went inside to the home they had built together, the cabin that had started as refuge and become a sanctuary. They climbed into bed, into each other's arms, and fell asleep the way they had for 30 years, together and content. In the morning, they would wake and continue the life they had created. They would tend their garden, read their books, visit their children and grandchildren. They would live each day with gratitude for the second chance they had been given. Because Katherine's future had indeed started with Beckett that day in Centralia. But it had continued through her own strength, her own choices, her own refusal to let trauma define her. Together, they had proven that reputation was meaningless, that society's judgment held no power, and that love could heal even the deepest wounds. They had built their happily ever after not in spite of the terrible things that happened, but because they refused to let those things win. And that, Katherine thought as she drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, was the best revenge of all. Living well, loving deeply, and finding joy in a life built on her own terms. The mountain man had offered her a future, but Katherine Anderson had seized it with both hands and turned it into something extraordinary. And she would not change a single moment of it.